The silence of the countryside was broken by a faint cry coming from the heart of the earth. There, beneath the cold mud, the magnate's pregnant wife was found alive, buried by someone close. But the true terror only began when the woman who buried her pretended to protect her from madness. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us which city you're watching us from. We continue. The London sky dawned grey that Monday in March, as if the city itself sensed that something was about to change. Marianne woke early, as always, but unlike other days, her hand instinctively sought the belly that was beginning to grow. 5 months pregnant. 5 months of uncertainties, of hidden joys and unspoken fears. Beside her, the empty space on the king-size bed seemed larger than it truly was. Robert had already left. Another meeting, another commitment, another emergency at the company. She was no longer surprised. The mansion in Belgravia breathed discreet luxury. Italian marble on the floor, paintings by renowned artists on the walls, a heated swimming pool in the garden that Marianne barely used. Everything impeccable, everything organized, everything functioning like a well-oiled machine. But there was something in that perfection that suffocated her. Perhaps it was the silence, or perhaps it was the feeling that, at some point in the last few years, she had become just another decorative piece in that setting. Marianne rose slowly, her bare feet touching the cold floor. She walked to the window and observed the garden below. The rose bushes she herself had planted 3 years ago continued to bloom, but now they were tended by gardeners she barely knew. Everything in her life had become like this, outsourced, distant, even the baby growing. Inside her seemed more like a solitary responsibility than a shared joy. She still remembered the day she told Robert about the pregnancy. She waited for the perfect moment, prepared a special dinner, lit candles. But when she finally spoke the words, he merely blinked, forced a smile, and replied that he needed to make an urgent call. He returned half an hour later, gave her a mechanical kiss on the forehead, and said he was happy. But Marianne saw something in his eyes that frightened her. It wasn't anger, it wasn't sadness, it was emptiness, as if she had announced the purchase of new furniture, not the arrival of a child. She descended the stairs, holding the mahogany handrail, feeling the weight of her belly pull at her spine. The house was too silent. Isabel, her 6-year-old daughter, was still asleep. The girl had her mother's curly hair and her father's intense brown eyes. She was the only thing in that house that still made Marianne truly smile. But even Isabel seemed to be drifting away. She spent more time with the nanny, with private tutors, with anyone but her. In the kitchen, Mrs. Peterson was already preparing coffee. The 60-something employee had worked in the house for almost 2 decades, since before Marianne and Robert married. She was a woman of few words, but with a keen eye. Nothing escaped Mrs. Peterson. And lately, Marianne felt that the employee observed her with something that seemed like concern. "Good morning, Mrs. Peterson." "Good morning, Mrs. Marianne. Did you sleep well?" Marianne gave a weak smile and sat at the table. "More or less. The baby keeps moving all night." Mrs. Peterson placed a cup of chamomile tea in front of her and rested her hand on Marianne's shoulder for a brief second. "It's a sign of health. A restless baby in the womb is a strong baby." Marianne nodded, but said nothing. There were so many things she wanted to say, but she didn't know how to start. She didn't know if she should. Maybe it was just paranoia. Maybe it was just pregnancy hormones making everything more intense. But she couldn't ignore the feeling that something was wrong, very wrong. It was at that moment that they heard the front door open, firm footsteps on the marble. Marianne didn't need to look to know who it was. She knew that sound. High heels tapping on the floor with military precision, the door closing with a soft click, the expensive perfume entering the house even before the person. Julianne. Robert's personal assistant appeared at the kitchen door with a professional smile plastered on her face. She wore an impeccable navy blue suit, her blonde hair pulled back in an elegant bun, her makeup perfect. At 38, Julianne Meadows had everything society expected of a successful executive. A degree in business administration from the LSE, an MBA in London, fluency in 4 languages. She was efficient, intelligent, organized, and she was there in her house at 7:30 on a Monday morning. "Marianne, good morning. How are you feeling?" The voice was sweet, but there was something in it that always sounded false to Marianne, as if every word was calculated, rehearsed. "I'm fine, thank you." Julianne entered the kitchen as if she owned the place. She took a cup from the cupboard, served herself coffee, added 2 drops of sweetener. Marianne watched every movement, feeling her stomach churn. It wasn't the first time Julianne had appeared so early. In fact, it was becoming more and more frequent. Sometimes she arrived, even before Robert left. She stayed in his office, resolving pending matters, organizing documents, making calls, and then she disappeared for some external meeting. But lately, Julianne wasn't just in the office. She was in the living room, in the kitchen, in the garden. Once, Marianne found her in Isabel's room reading a story to the girl. Another time, she saw her on the veranda, drinking wine with Robert late into the night. And whenever Marianne appeared, the conversation changed tone. The laughter ceased, the atmosphere became heavy. "I need Robert urgently," Julianne said, looking at her phone. "We have a meeting with investors at 9, and he still hasn't answered my messages." Marianne took a sip of her tea. "He left early. I don't know where he went." Julianne raised an eyebrow. "Interesting. He didn't tell me." There was something in the way she said that. A slight accusation, as if Marianne was responsible for knowing exactly where her husband was every second, as if she had an obligation to keep Julianne informed about Robert's life. Mrs. Peterson cleaned the sink with more force than necessary. Marianne noticed the tension in the employee's shoulders. She felt it too. The air was heavy in that kitchen. "I'll wait for him in the office," Julianne announced, turning to leave. "Oh, Marianne, just a reminder that on Thursday we have that charity dinner. The dress I ordered for you has arrived. It's in your closet." Marianne blinked. "You ordered a dress for me?" Julianne smiled. "Of course. Robert asked me to. You know how busy he is, and with the pregnancy I imagined you wouldn't have time to choose something suitable. It's a beautiful Dolce & Gabbana, royal blue with a cut that will disguise the belly well." The words hung in the air like a silent slap. Disguise the belly well, as if the pregnancy was something to hide, as if the child growing inside her was an aesthetic inconvenience. Marianne felt tears burn her eyes, but swallowed them. She wouldn't give Julianne the satisfaction of seeing her cry. "Thank you, but I won't be going to the dinner." Julianne stopped at the door and turned slowly. "What do you mean you're not going?" "I'm not feeling well. The pregnancy has been tiring." "Marianne, the event is extremely important for the company's image. All the major investors will be there. Robert needs you by his side." Marianne stood up, placing her hands on the table. "Julianne, I don't feel well, and even if I did, I'm not obligated to go anywhere just because it's important for the company. I don't work for the company. I am Robert's wife, not an employee." Julianne's smile faded. For a second, Marianne saw something cross the assistant's face, something cold, cutting, but it was so quick that she almost doubted she had seen it. "Of course," Julianne said softly. "I understand perfectly. I'll inform Robert. Have a good day." And she left, leaving a trail of expensive perfume and tension in the air. As soon as they heard the office door close, Mrs. Peterson approached Marianne and whispered, "That woman doesn't fool me." Marianne looked at the employee, surprised. "What?" "That Julianne. She's not just here to work. I see how she looks at Mr. Robert. I see how she looks at you too, with anger, with envy." Marianne sat down again, feeling her legs weak. "Do you think there's something between them?" Mrs. Peterson shook her head. "I don't know, my dear. But I know she wants there to be, and I know she doesn't like you. A woman like me who has lived a lot learns to recognize that kind of look. It's the look of someone who wants to take someone else's place." Mrs. Peterson's words echoed in Marianne's head for the rest of the morning. She tried to distract herself, played with Isabel, answered some emails, flipped through a magazine, but she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched, judged, slowly replaced. Robert arrived home in the middle of the afternoon, exhausted. He threw his briefcase on the sofa and loosened his tie. Marianne was sitting on the veranda, reading a book she couldn't absorb a single word from. "Hi," he said, kissing her quickly on the top of her head. "Hi. How was your day?" "Chaotic. We had a problem with one of the suppliers and I had to resolve it personally." Marianne closed the book. Julianne was here this morning looking for you. Robert sighed. I know. She called me about 20 times. That woman is tireless. There was something in his tone. Admiration, exhaustion. Marianne couldn't identify it. She said she ordered a dress for me for the dinner on Thursday. Robert blinked as if trying to remember. Oh yes, the charity dinner. We need to go, Murray. It's important. Marianne felt her chest tighten. I don't want to go, Robert. He turned to her, surprised. Why? Because I'm pregnant, tired, and I don't feel like spending the whole night smiling at strangers while you talk business. Robert ran a hand over his face. Marianne, please, don't make it complicated. It's just one night. It's always just one night. It's always just one commitment. It's always just one more thing I need to do to keep up appearances. But what about me, Robert? What do I need? And what about our baby? He looked at her for a long moment, and Marianne saw something on his face that frightened her. Weariness. Not the physical weariness of a day's work, but something deeper, as if he was tired of her, tired of that conversation, tired of having to deal with feelings. Let's talk about this later, he said, turning to enter the house. Marianne stayed there, alone on the veranda, feeling the baby move inside her. She placed her hand on her belly and whispered, Everything will be fine, my love. I will take care of you, even if I have to do it alone. The following days passed in a strange haze. Marianne barely saw Robert. He left earlier and returned later and later. And Julianne was always around, in the house, in the office, on calls. It was as if she had infiltrated every corner of their lives. On Thursday, the day of the dinner, Marianne woke with a throbbing headache. She went down for coffee and found a huge box in the living room. Inside, the royal blue dress Julianne had mentioned. It was beautiful, expensive, elegant, and Marianne hated every inch of it. Mrs. Peterson entered the living room and stopped when she saw the dress. Are you going to wear it? Marianne shook her head. No, I'll pretend I'm not feeling well. The employee approached. Mrs. Marianne, can I say something? Of course. Mrs. Peterson lowered her voice. Last night I was closing up the house and I overheard a conversation. Mr. Robert was in the office with that Julianne, and she said something that made me freeze. Marianne felt her heart race. What? She said you were getting in the way of his plans, that the pregnancy was a mistake, that you were using the baby to trap him. Marianne felt as if the ground had disappeared beneath her feet. Did Robert say anything? Mrs. Peterson averted her gaze. He didn't deny it. He just stayed silent. Tears finally rolled down Marianne's face. She had tried to hold them back, tried to be strong, but those words shattered her. Her own husband considered their child a mistake, and worse, he was discussing it with another woman. That night, Marianne didn't go to the dinner. She locked herself in her room and ignored Robert's knocks on the door, his pleas to talk, his empty apologies. She needed to think. She needed to understand what was happening to her life. It was on Friday that everything changed. Marianne received a message on her phone from an unknown number. She almost deleted it, thinking it was spam. But something made her open it. The message simply said, I need to talk to you. It's about Robert and Julianne. Meet me at the cafe on Oxford Street at 3 in the afternoon. Don't tell anyone. Marianne stared at the message for several minutes. It could be a trap, it could be someone trying to extort money, it could be anything. But something inside her, a voice she had been ignoring for weeks, told her she needed to go. At 2:30, Marianne left the house discreetly. She told Mrs. Peterson she was going to the obstetrician, but took a taxi directly to Oxford Street. The cafe was small, full of students and freelancers working on laptops. Marianne chose a table in the corner and waited. 10 minutes later, a woman approached. She was about 40, with short hair, simple clothes. She sat down in front of Marianne without asking permission. Thank you for coming. My name is Patricia. I worked for your husband until 3 months ago. Marianne frowned. I don't remember you. Patricia smiled sadly. Of course not. I was in accounting. Invisible people. But I saw everything. She opened a bag and took out an envelope. Inside there were photos of Robert and Julianne together in restaurants, in hotels, entering and leaving apartments. Some were old, from years ago. Others were recent. Marianne felt nauseous. How long? 3 years at least. Patricia looked into her eyes. But that's not all. Julianne isn't just a mistress. She has plans. She wants everything. The company, the house, the children. And she will do whatever it takes to get it. Marianne swallowed hard. How do you know this? Because I heard. In the office one day they thought no one was there. She told him you were an obstacle, that you needed to get out of the way, and when I was fired a week later without explanation, I understood that she had discovered that I knew too much. Why are you telling me this now? Patricia hesitated. Because I saw the news about your pregnancy on social media, and I got scared. Julianne won't want to share Robert with another child. She's already jealous of Isabel. A new baby is an even greater threat to her. Marianne felt a chill down her spine. Are you saying she might do something against me or the baby? Patricia held her hand. I'm saying you need to be very careful. Julianne is not a normal person. She's obsessed. And obsessed people are capable of terrible things. Marianne returned home in shock. The photos were burning inside her bag. She needed to confront Robert, needed to understand what was happening. But when she arrived, the house was empty. Robert had left for another business trip, and Julianne had gone with him. That night, Marianne barely slept. She tossed and turned in bed, feeling the baby move, thinking about Patricia's words. She needed concrete proof. She needed a plan. It was on Saturday morning that her phone rang. It was a message from Robert. I need you to come to the farm in the Cotswolds, the one we're selling. I need to talk to you away from everything. It's important. About us, about the baby, about our future. Please come alone at 2 in the afternoon. Marianne read the message several times. Robert never spoke like that. He never asked to talk about feelings. But perhaps, finally, he was ready to be honest. Maybe he wanted to start over. She replied, I'll be there. What Marianne didn't know was that message hadn't been sent by Robert, and that the farm in the Cotswolds, abandoned for years, hid a destiny that would change her life forever. As she prepared to leave the house that sunny afternoon, putting on a comfortable dress and grabbing her car keys, Julianne was already on the road, driving towards the farm with a cold smile on her lips and a bag full of things no one should ever carry. The game had begun, and Marianne still didn't know she was playing. The road to the Cotswolds was surprisingly empty that Saturday afternoon. Marianne drove her white SUV along the outskirts of London, feeling her heart beat faster and faster as she moved away from the capital. The sky was cloudy, heavy, as if a storm was brewing on the horizon. She turned on the radio, but turned it off immediately afterwards. She needed silence to think. Robert's message kept echoing in her mind. That didn't sound like something he would say. Robert wasn't given to romanticism, to grand gestures, to conversations about feelings, but perhaps, precisely for that reason, this meeting was important. Maybe he had finally realized he was losing his family. Maybe this was their chance to start over. Marianne instinctively touched her belly. 5.5 months now. The baby moved constantly, as if it knew something important was happening. She had thought about telling Mrs. Peterson where she was going, but Robert's message asked for secrecy, alone. So she just said she was going shopping and would be back before dinner. As she entered the English countryside, the landscape changed. Buildings gave way to smaller houses, then to country estates, then to vast green fields dotted with trees. Marianne had never been to that farm before. She knew it was part of the company's assets, an old property Robert had bought years ago with the intention of transforming it into a luxury resort. But the project never got off the ground, and the farm remained abandoned, waiting for a buyer. The GPS indicated that she should turn left onto a dirt road. Marianne slowed down and cautiously entered. The path was narrow, lined with tall eucalyptus trees that blocked the sunlight. A strange sensation began to grow in her chest. It wasn't fear exactly, but a discomfort, an intuition she couldn't name. After almost 10 minutes on that bumpy road, she finally spotted the farm. It was larger than she imagined. A 2-story main house with peeling paint and broken windows. Around it, several ruined sheds, an old empty cattle pen, and fields that had turned into overgrown wilderness. Everything there breathed abandonment. Marianne parked the car in front of the house and turned off the engine. The silence was absolute. Not even birds sang. She took out her phone to call Robert, but there was no signal. Of course, in the middle of nowhere, far from any cell phone tower. She took a deep breath and got out of the car. The air was humid, heavy. Her low-heeled boots sank slightly into the wet earth. She looked around, searching for any sign of Robert, but saw no car other than her own. "Robert," she called, but her voice seemed to be swallowed by the silence. She walked towards the house, climbing the rotten wooden steps of the veranda. The main door was ajar. Marianne hesitated. Something wasn't right. Why would Robert make her come to a place like that? Why choose an abandoned farm for an important conversation? It was then that she heard a sound behind her. Footsteps on the earth. Marianne turned quickly and felt the air escape her lungs. It wasn't Robert. It was Julianne. The assistant stood a few meters away, wearing casual clothes Marianne had never seen her wear. Jeans, rubber boots, a black jacket. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and there was something in her eyes. That made Marianne take a step back. "Julianne, what are you doing here? Where's Robert?" Julianne smiled, a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Robert isn't here, Marianne. He never was." Marianne felt her stomach churn. "What do you mean?" "He sent me a message asking me to come." "No, I sent it. From his phone." The world seemed to tilt. Marianne held onto the veranda railing. "You? Why?" Julianne began to walk slowly towards her, like a predator circling its prey. "Because we need to have a conversation, a real conversation, without Robert, without witnesses, without interruptions." Marianne looked at her car, calculating the distance. If she ran now, could she get there before Julianne? Could she lock the doors and start the engine? "No use running," Julianne said, as if reading her thoughts. "Look at your car." Marianne turned and saw. All 4 tires were flat. When had that happened? How had she not noticed? "I arrived before you," Julianne explained calmly. "I was waiting, watching. It's amazing how much you trust people, Marianne. How naive you are. Did you really believe Robert would write something so sentimental, that he would ask for a romantic meeting at an abandoned farm?" Tears began to burn in Marianne's eyes, but she held them back. "Julianne, what do you want?" The assistant stopped a few steps from her. "I want what I've always wanted. Robert, the company, the life that should be mine. But you're in the way. Always have been." Marianne felt anger grow, overcoming fear. "You're his mistress. I know everything. I saw the photos." Julianne laughed. "Mistress? What a small word to describe what we are. I am Robert's true partner. I built that empire with him. I was the one who stayed late solving problems, while you slept in your princess bed. I was the one who supported him, who understood his dreams, his ambitions. And you? You're just an ornament, a trophy he displays at social events." "It's not true," Marianne whispered, but her voice came out weak, without conviction. "No? Then why does he spend more time with me than with you? Why does he tell me his fears, his plans, his desires? Why, when he needs someone, does he call me, not you?" Every word was a stab. Marianne knew there was truth there. It hurt to admit, but she knew. "I could have been patient," Julianne continued, her voice hardening. "I could have waited for you to realize you don't belong in that world and leave. But then you did the worst possible thing. You got pregnant. Again." Marianne protectively placed her hands over her belly. "This is his child. Our child. It's a chain. It's you trying to tie Robert down forever. But it won't work, Marianne, because after today, you won't be there to tie him down anymore." The fear now was pure, icy, paralyzing. Marianne tried to run, but her legs failed. She stumbled on the veranda steps and fell to her knees in the dirt. Pain shot through her spine, but what terrified her was the baby. The baby. Julianne was on her in seconds. She grabbed her arms with surprising strength. Marianne tried to scream, but a hand covered her mouth. She felt something pressed against her nose, a cloth with a sweet, chemical, suffocating smell. "Don't fight," Julianne whispered in her ear. "It will be easier this way." Marianne tried to resist, tried to shake her head, but her movements became slow, heavy. The world began to spin, colors blurred, and then only darkness. When Marianne regained consciousness, she didn't know how much time had passed. Minutes, hours? Everything was dark, too dark and cold, so cold. She tried to move, but her body didn't respond properly. She was lying on her side, on something hard, uneven. Earth. She was lying on the earth. Marianne blinked, trying to see, but she could barely see her own hand in front of her face. Where was she? She tried to sit up, but her head throbbed. The dizziness was horrible. And then she heard the sound. A sound that made her freeze. The sound of a shovel digging earth. "Help!" She tried to scream, but her voice came out hoarse, weak. "Please, someone help me." "No one will hear you," Julianne's voice came from the darkness. "We are far from everything. There are no neighbors, no passers-by, no one." Marianne finally managed to sit up. Her vision was adjusting to the dim light coming from the cloud-covered moon. She was in a hole, a deep hole, dug in the earth, next to a concrete structure that seemed to be part of an old silo. And above her, Julianne continued digging, throwing more earth next to the hole. "What are you doing?" Marianne screamed, panic taking over. "Julianne, for God's sake, what are you doing?" Julianne stopped and looked down. Her face was covered in sweat and dirt, but there was an eerie calm in her eyes. "I'm solving a problem. You're going to disappear, Marianne. They'll look for you, of course, but they won't find you. They'll think you ran away, that you had a mental breakdown because of the pregnancy. I've prepared everything. I forged some of your emails talking about how you felt trapped, suffocated. I left a note on your desk saying you needed time alone. Everyone will believe it. You're crazy. Robert will know it was you." Julianne laughed. "Robert? Robert is in London attending an important dinner with Japanese investors. I myself confirmed his presence this morning. He has an alibi, and so do I. I spent the whole afternoon in virtual meetings with the camera on, talking to people from the office. My laptop is recording everything. No one will suspect me." Marianne felt tears roll down. "Julianne, please, think about the baby. You're going to kill an innocent child." For a brief second, something crossed Julianne's face. Hesitation? Remorse? But it passed, quickly. "This baby shouldn't exist. It has no place in the world I'm building." And then Julianne began to push the earth into the hole. "No!" Marianne screamed, trying to protect her face as the earth fell on her. "No, please, don't do this." But Julianne continued, shovel after shovel, throwing earth over her. Marianne tried to climb the walls of the hole, but the earth was too soft. It slipped through her fingers. She screamed, pleaded, cried, but Julianne didn't stop. The earth began to cover her legs, then her waist. Marianne felt the crushing, suffocating weight. The baby moved frantically inside her, as if it also knew the danger. She tried to keep screaming, but earth entered her mouth. She spat, choked, tried to breathe. "Remember this," Julianne's voice came from above, already more distant. "You had everything, and you wasted it. I'm going to fix this. I'm going to take care of Robert as you never could. I'm going to raise Isabel as my daughter, and everyone will forget you ever existed." The earth reached Marianne's neck. She turned her face to the side, trying to find pockets of air. Her hands desperately searched for something to hold on to, but there was only earth, earth, earth. Marianne's last conscious thought before total darkness was of the baby, of the child she would never know, of the child who would die there along with her without having the chance to live. And then, silence. Joshua Miller woke at 5 in the morning on Sunday, as he had for 40 years. His body was no longer the same. His knees ached when it rained. His sight was tired, but he remained punctual. A lifetime working the land didn't disappear just because one was retired. He was doing odd jobs for the company of a certain Robert Miller. Simple work. Go to the old farm in the Cotswolds, check the state of the land, take some photos, make a basic report. There were interested buyers, and they needed to know if the soil was good for anything other than weeds. Joshua arrived at the farm around 6 in the morning. The sun was still rising, painting the sky orange and pink. He took his tools from the pickup truck and began to walk across the land, making notes in an old notebook. That's when he heard it. At first thought it was the wind, or some animal trapped somewhere, but he stopped and listened carefully. It wasn't the wind. It was a human sound, faint, muffled, but definitely human. A moan. Joshua followed the sound, walking quickly through the fields until he reached the old silo. The sound came from there, from under the earth. His heart raced. There was something there. Someone there. He knelt and put his ear to the ground. "Hello? Is anyone there?" The moan grew louder, an attempt at a response. Joshua didn't waste time. He grabbed the shovel and began to dig. The Tikiwa. Earth was soft, freshly moved. Someone had dug there recently and had buried something or someone. His hands worked frantically. He dug and dug, throwing earth to the side, and then his fingers touched something. Fabric. He dug faster with his hands now and pulled. It was an arm, a woman's arm. "My God," he whispered. Joshua dug around, uncovering more of the body. The face emerged, covered in dirt, pale, her lips purple. But she was breathing, weakly, superficially, but breathing. "Hold on, miss, I'll get you out of there." He pulled her out with all the strength he still had. She was heavy, her body limp, unconscious. Joshua laid her on the ground and wiped the dirt from her face, her mouth, her nose. She coughed, spat out dirt, but didn't open her eyes. It was then that he saw her belly. She was pregnant. His phone had no signal there, so Joshua carried her to the pickup truck. It wasn't close, and he had to stop twice to catch his breath, but he finally managed. He put her in the back seat and drove as he had never driven in his life. The nearest health post was 20 minutes away. Joshua honked non-stop until someone came out. A nurse appeared at the door, and her eyes widened when she saw the woman's condition. "We need help here," she shouted inside the post. In minutes, Marianne was taken to a stretcher. Doctors and nurses moved quickly, checking vital signs, cleaning the dirt, administering saline. Joshua stood in the corridor, trembling, not quite understanding what had just happened. A young doctor approached him. "Did you find her, sir?" Joshua nodded. She was buried, alive, on the farm down the road. The doctor looked at the door of the room, where Marianne was being treated. "She's lucky to be alive. A few more minutes and there would have been nothing we could do." "And the baby?" "We're going to do an ultrasound now, but from what I've seen, the baby is moving. It's a miracle." Joshua sat in a plastic chair and put his face in his hands. He wasn't a man to cry, but there, in that cold health post corridor, the tears came. He had saved a life. Maybe two. Marianne woke hours later in a small, simple room. Her throat hurt, her whole body ached, but she was alive, alive. The first thing she did was place her hand on her belly. The baby moved in response, strong, as if saying, "I'm here, Mommy." The tears came, uncontrollable. She had survived. They had survived. A nurse entered the room. "How are you feeling?" Marianne tried to speak, but her voice came out hoarse. "Where am I?" "At the Bath health post. A gentleman brought you. Said he found you buried on a farm." The memories returned like an avalanche. Julianne, the shovel, the earth, the despair, the feeling of death. "I need to call my family," Marianne managed to say. The nurse hesitated. "Perhaps it's better to wait. You've been through severe trauma. You need to rest." But Marianne shook her head. "Please, I need to call." The nurse brought a phone. Marianne dialed Robert's number, but no one answered. She tried again. Nothing. Then she called Mrs. Peterson. The employee answered on the second ring. "Mrs. Marianne? Thank God." "Where are you, madam? Mr. Robert is desperate. The police are looking." Marianne took a deep breath. "Mrs. Peterson, I need you to come pick me up. And don't tell anyone where I am, especially not Robert. Not yet. But Mrs. Marianne, please trust me. And when you come, bring Isabel, but come alone." Mrs. Peterson hesitated, but then agreed. "I'll be there. Send me the address." Marianne hung up and closed her eyes. She was alive, but she knew the nightmare was far from over. Julianne was still out there, free, pretending to be a normal person, waiting for her plan to work. But Marianne wasn't going to let that happen. She had survived for a reason, and now, for the first time in a long time, she knew exactly what she needed to do. Meanwhile, in London, Julianne arrived at the Belgravia mansion with a perfectly rehearsed, worried expression. Robert was in the living room talking on the phone with the police, desperate. When he saw Julianne, he hung up. Robert hung up the phone and looked at Julianne with red eyes as if he hadn't slept properly. "She disappeared, Julianne. My wife just disappeared and no one knows where she is." Julianne approached him, placing her hand on his shoulder with a familiarity she had cultivated over years. Her voice was soft, concerned, perfectly calibrated. "We'll find her, Robert. The police are doing everything. They can. Maybe she just needs time. You know how pregnancy can affect a woman's emotions." Robert ran his hands over his face. "She was strange these last few weeks, distant. Sometimes I caught her looking at me as if she didn't recognize me." Julianne sat beside him on the sofa. She needed to be careful now. Every word counted. Marianne has been facing a lot of pressure. The pregnancy, the changes in her body, the media attention. It's natural that she would want to escape all of it for a while. But to leave without telling anyone? Without taking clothes, without taking anything? Robert shook his head. "That's not normal, Julianne." "The police found some emails she wrote," Julianne said softly, talking about how suffocated she felt, about needing space. "Maybe she planned this longer than we imagined." Robert looked at her, surprised. "What emails? I didn't see any emails like that." Julianne averted her gaze, feigning discomfort. "They were emails to a friend. The police showed them to me. I didn't want to tell you because I thought it would hurt you more, but Marianne had been considering separating from you for weeks." The lie came out, so naturally that she almost believed it herself. Robert turned pale. "She wanted to separate?" Julianne held his hand. "Robert, you worked too much. You barely saw each other. She felt lonely. I saw this happening and tried to help, but there were limits to what I could do." Robert stood up and walked to the window. Outside, the mansion's garden glowed under the afternoon sun. Everything seemed normal, perfect, but his life was falling apart. "I should have paid more attention. I should have noticed." Julianne approached him from behind. "You can't blame yourself. You were building an empire, taking care of hundreds of employees, making decisions that affect thousands of lives. Marianne should have understood that." The words were poison disguised as consolation, and Robert, exhausted and desperate, absorbed them without realizing. It was then that the living room door opened and Isabel ran in holding her teddy bear. "Daddy, is Mommy back?" Robert knelt and hugged his daughter. "Not yet, my love, but we'll find her." Isabel looked at Julianne with those intense brown eyes that so reminded her of Marianne. "Will the lady from the office help?" Julianne smiled, but there was something cold in that smile. "Of course I will, darling. I'll do everything I can to bring your mother back." Isabel continued to look at her, and for a moment Julianne felt uncomfortable. It was as if the child could see through her, see the truth she hid so carefully. But then the girl turned and ran to her room, calling for the nanny. Julianne breathed a sigh of relief. Everything was going according to plan. Marianne was buried far from everything, with no chance of being found. In a few days, perhaps weeks, the police would give up. The story of a pregnant, unstable woman who ran away from home would be accepted. And she, Julianne, would be there to comfort Robert, to take care of Isabel, to take the place that should have always been hers. Meanwhile, 200 miles away, Mrs. Peterson drove down the road with a pounding heart. Marianne had been vague on the phone, but the urgency in her voice was unmistakable. Something terrible had happened, and the order not to tell Robert was even more disturbing. She arrived at the Bath Health Post shortly after 5 in the afternoon. She found Marianne sitting on a plastic chair, In the corridor, wearing clothes the nurse had lent her. She was pale, with deep, dark circles under her eyes, her hair still with traces of dirt, but she was alive. "Mrs. Marianne, dear God!" Mrs. Peterson rushed to her and hugged her. "What happened? Why are you here? Why don't you want Mr. Robert to know?" Marianne looked around, making sure no one was listening. "Let's go to the car. I'll explain everything." In the car, with the doors closed, Marianne told everything. The fake message, the trap at the farm, Julianne, the earth, the despair. Mrs. Peterson listened, with increasingly wide eyes, her hand covering her mouth. "My God, my dear, that woman tried to kill you. She tried to kill you and the baby." Marianne nodded, tears finally escaping. "If that man hadn't found me, I'd be dead now. We'd be dead." Mrs. Peterson held her hands. "We need to go to the police. Now. That woman cannot remain free." Marianne shook her head. "Not yet. Julianne is smart, Mrs. Peterson. Very smart. She must have already created a perfect alibi. If I appear now, without concrete proof, it will be my word against hers, and she'll say I'm crazy, that I made it all up, that it's all in my head. But you have the man who found you. He's a witness. He's a witness that he found me buried, not of who buried me. Julianne will say it was someone else, that she wasn't near the farm, that she has proof of where she was. And knowing her, I'm sure she's already prepared everything." Mrs. Peterson took a deep breath. "So what are we going to do?" Marianne wiped her tears. "We're going to gather proof. We're going to find out everything she did, everything she planned. And when we have enough evidence, then we'll go to the police and to Robert. And meanwhile, she stays in your house near your husband, near Isabel." The mention of her daughter made Marianne swallow hard. "I know. That's why I need you, Mrs. Peterson. You'll be my eyes and ears there. You'll observe everything Julianne does, everything she says, and you'll protect Isabel. You can count on it. That woman won't lay a finger on that child as long as I'm alive." Marianne picked up her phone. "I'll hide for a few days. There's a guest house nearby, where I can stay without raising suspicion. Meanwhile, I need you to do a few things." She made a mental list. First, she needed clothes and personal items, but nothing that would make Mrs. Peterson raise suspicion at the mansion. Second, she needed the employee to discreetly investigate Julianne's background, look for anything suspicious in her past. Third, and most importantly, she needed to find Patricia, the woman who had shown her the photos at the cafe. She had information. She might have more proof. Marianne spent the next 3 days in a small guest house by the road. It was a simple, clean, discreet place. The owner, an elderly, white-haired lady named Eunice, asked no questions when Marianne paid in cash and asked not to be disturbed. She simply offered tea and said if she needed anything to just let her know. During those days, Marianne rested, regained her strength and thought. She thought a lot, about her life, about her marriage, about all the times she ignored the signs. Julianne had always been there, slowly infiltrating, taking up space, and she, Marianne, had allowed it. For fear of seeming jealous, for fear of being the nagging wife who didn't understand the demands of her husband's work, for fear of losing Robert. But now she understood. There was nothing to lose because she had lost Robert a long time ago. Perhaps she had never truly had him. The man she had married 10 years ago, that ambitious but still human young man, had transformed into something different. Success had consumed him, and Julianne had taken advantage of every loophole, every moment of absence, to insert herself. On the third day, Mrs. Peterson appeared with news. They sat in an isolated corner of the guest house, drinking coffee. "I managed to get some things," Mrs. Peterson said in a low voice. "I went to the office and rummaged through Julianne's computer when she left for a meeting. I found this." She handed a USB drive to Marianne. "These are files, conversations she had with Mr. Robert, emails, photos, some very compromising things." Marianne connected the USB drive to the laptop she had bought. What she saw made her nauseous. Intimate messages between Robert and Julianne dating back 3 years. Photos of the two together, in situations that left no doubt about the relationship. Emails where they planned trips, discussed the future, talked about how different it would be if they were together. There was more. Financial files showing that Julianne had access to Robert's private accounts, documents she had forged, including the fake emails she had mentioned to the police, making it seem like Marianne was planning to run away. But the most disturbing thing was in a hidden folder called Project M. Marianne opened it and felt her blood run cold. They were detailed notes about her routine, her schedule, places she frequented, people she spoke with. Julianne had been following her, studying her, documenting every move. And at the end of the folder, a document titled Final Plan. Marianne opened it and read. It was exactly what Julianne had done. Every step described in detail. The fake message, the farm, even the syringes she would use if Marianne resisted. "This is proof," Marianne whispered. "This is proof of what she did." "There's more," Mrs. Peterson said. "I found Patricia. She wants to talk to you." Marianne looked at the employee. "How did you find her?" "I went to her old office, asked around. A colleague gave me her phone number. She's scared," Mrs. Marianne said that after she met you at the cafe, she started receiving anonymous threats. "Someone knows she spoke with you." "Julianne." "Probably. But Patricia is brave. She wants to help. And she has more documents, things she took from the office before she was fired." Marianne took a deep breath. "We need to meet her. Safely. Somewhere public. With people." The next day, Marianne and Patricia met at a crowded shopping center in the Cotswolds. They sat in a noisy food court, surrounded by families and teenagers. Patricia looked tired, scared but determined. "Thank you for coming," Marianne said. Patricia opened a folder. "After I met you at the cafe, I started investigating more. I have friends who still work at the company. They told me things." She spread papers on the table. "Julianne Meadows is not her real name, or at least it wasn't. She legally changed it 6 years ago, shortly before starting to work for your husband." Marianne picked up a certificate. "And what was her name before?" "Julianne Santos, and she has a history. She was married, her husband died under suspicious circumstances, an accidental fall down a staircase. The investigation was closed, but the man's family never believed it was." "An accident?" Marianne's heart pounded. "She killed her husband. There's no concrete proof, but there's a pattern. Before that marriage, she dated a rich businessman in Birmingham. The man broke up with her and 2 weeks later suffered a car accident. He survived but was left with sequelae. And guess who took care of him during his recovery and received a good sum as compensation?" "Julianne." Patricia nodded. "She's a predator, Marianne. She chooses successful men, gets close, gains trust. And when she doesn't get what she wants through love, she tries force or tragedy." Marianne looked at the documents. "Why are you doing this? Why are you helping me?" Patricia hesitated. "Because I was also her victim. Not in the same way as you, but I was. She destroyed my career, my reputation. She spread lies about me in the office, and all because I saw too much. Now it's my chance to stop her from destroying more lives." The two women looked at each other, and at that moment they formed a silent alliance. Together, they would bring Julianne down. Meanwhile, at the Belgravia mansion, Isabel played in the garden under Mrs. Peterson's watchful eye. The girl was quieter than usual, thoughtful. Her mother's absence weighed on her, even if no one spoke openly about it. "Mrs. Peterson," the girl called, "why is the lady from the office living here now?" The employee looked at the house. Julianne had definitively moved in 3 days ago, under the justification that Robert needed support during that difficult time. She had occupied one of the guest bedrooms, but spent most of her time in Robert's office or the main living room, as if she already owned the place. "It's temporary, dear. She's helping your father." "I don't like her," Isabel said, softly. "She looks at me in a strange way." Mrs. Peterson knelt beside the girl. "What kind of way?" "As if she wants me to disappear, just like she looked at Mommy." A chill ran down Mrs. Peterson's spine. Children had a perception that adults often lost. They felt things they couldn't name, but that were there. "Do you remember anything the lady from the office said or did that scared you?" Isabel bit her lip, thinking. "Once I woke up at night because I heard voices. I left my room and saw her in the hallway talking on the phone. She didn't see me. and she said something like, when she's gone for good, everything will be easier. Mrs. Peterson felt her blood run cold. When was this, my love? A few days before Mommy left. The employee hugged Isabel tightly. You're a very smart girl, very brave, and I promise you that your Mommy will come back soon. That night, Mrs. Peterson called Marianne and told her about the conversation with Isabel. Marianne listened in silence, tears streaming down her face. Her daughter had witnessed Julianne's intentions. Her daughter was in danger. I need to go back, Marianne said. I can't leave Isabel there with that woman. Not yet, Mrs. Peterson warned. If you appear now, Julianne will react, and we don't know what she's capable of. We have to be smart. Marianne knew the employee was right, but every day away from Isabel was torture. She touched her belly, feeling the baby move. 2 children depended on her now. She couldn't act on impulse. She had to act strategically. The next day, Joshua Miller received a visit. Marianne had gotten his address through the health post and went to his small house in rural Bath. The old farmer was in the backyard tending his chickens when she arrived. Mr. Miller, he turned and his eyes widened. Miss, you're well. And the baby? Marianne smiled. We're well. Thanks to you, sir. You saved our lives. Joshua wiped his hands on his apron and approached. Thank God I arrived in time. That was the most frightening thing I've ever seen in my life. I came here to thank you and to ask for your help once more. She told him everything. About Julianne, about the plan, about the need for proof. Joshua listened attentively, shaking his head in disbelief. That woman is the devil himself, Marianne agreed, and I need to prove what she did. You told me the earth was soft, freshly dug. Did you take photos of the place? Joshua nodded. I took some, yes, for the report. I still have them on my phone. He showed her the photos, the hole, the earth around it, the exact spot where Marianne had been buried. They were important evidence. Can I keep these photos? And I need you, when the time comes, to testify about everything you saw. Joshua didn't hesitate. You can count on me. That woman cannot go unpunished. What she did is monstrous. With Joshua's photos, Patricia's documents, Julianne's computer files, and Isabel's testimony, Marianne finally had a case. But she knew she needed something more. She needed to catch Julianne in another lie, in another act that would definitively prove her guilt. And she knew exactly how to do it. The next morning, Marianne called Robert. It was Julianne who answered his phone. The assistant's voice froze momentarily when she heard who was on the other end of the line. Hello, who is this? It's me, Julianne. Marianne, I'm alive. Surprised? There was a long silence. Marianne could almost hear Julianne's thoughts racing, trying to understand how this was possible. Marianne? Julianne's voice was controlled now, but there was a tension in it. Thank God. Where are you? Robert is desperate. I'm sure he is. Marianne smiled coldly. I want to talk to him. He just left, but I can come pick you up. Tell me where you are. I don't think so, Julianne. Actually, I want you to know something. I know everything. I know what you did, and I have proof. Another silence. Marianne could feel the panic on the other side. Marianne, what are you talking about? Julianne's voice tried to sound confused, but the tremor was there, almost imperceptible. Are you all right? Where are you? Let's talk in person. Marianne gripped the phone tightly. We will talk, tonight, at the mansion, at 8 o'clock. And you will be there, Julianne. Because if you're not, I'm going straight to the police with everything I have. Marianne, you're not making sense. You're scaring me. I think the pregnancy is affecting you. The attempt to make her doubt her own sanity was classic Julianne, but it wouldn't work anymore. 8 o'clock, don't be late. Marianne hung up before Julianne could respond. Her heart was racing, but there was a clarity in her mind that she hadn't felt in months. For the first time since everything began, she was in control. Mrs. Peterson arrived at the guest house an hour later, bringing Patricia and Joshua with her. The 3 had agreed to be present at the final confrontation. They needed witnesses, people who could confirm every word, every piece of evidence, every revelation. Let's review everything one more time, Marianne said, spreading the documents on the table. We cannot make any mistakes. They spent the entire afternoon organizing the evidence. Joshua's photos showing the spot where Marianne was buried, Patricia's documents revealing Julianne's dark past, the computer files showing the detailed planning of the crime, and Isabel's testimony, the most powerful piece of all. Marianne had also asked Mrs. Peterson to discreetly install additional security cameras in the mansion's main living room. Everything that happened that night would be recorded. There would be no way for Julianne to deny it. At 7 o'clock they left for London, Marianne in the front seat of Mrs. Peterson's car, her hands on her belly, breathing deeply. The baby moved, as if sensing its mother's tension. "It's all right, my love," she whispered. "It will end today. It will finally end." When they arrived at the mansion, the lights were on. Robert's car was in the garage, and Julianne's too. Marianne looked at the house where she had lived for 10 years. From the outside it looked the same, but everything had changed. She had changed. "Let's go in through the back door," Marianne instructed. "I need to see Isabel first." They entered silently through the kitchen. The house was too quiet. Mrs. Peterson guided Marianne to Isabel's room. The girl was lying on the bed, looking at the ceiling, clutching her teddy bear. "Isabel," Marianne whispered from the doorway. The girl turned her head and her eyes widened. "Mommy!" Marianne ran to her and hugged her tightly, tears finally escaping. "My daughter, my love, I'm here, I'm here!" Isabel cried too, clinging to her mother's neck. "I knew you'd come back, I knew. The lady from the office said you wouldn't come back, but I knew she was lying." Marianne pulled back slightly to look into her daughter's eyes. "Isabel, I need you to be very brave. Now, I need you to tell me everything you saw and heard, about the lady from the office, about what happened before I left." The girl swallowed hard, but nodded. She was a child, but she understood the gravity of the moment. "I saw her in your room, Mommy. She was going through your things, and she was talking on the phone. She said that when you were gone, everything would be fine." Marianne held her daughter's small hands. "And do you remember anything else? Anything she said or did?" Isabel thought for a moment. "One night I woke up and went to get water. I passed Daddy's office and the door was open. She was there with him, and they were kissing." The words pierced Marianne like knives, but she kept her expression calm. "When was this?" "A long time ago, before you got pregnant. I didn't tell you because I thought you'd be sad." Marianne hugged her daughter again. "You didn't do anything wrong, my love, and now you're going to help me fix all of this. Are you ready?" Isabel nodded, holding her mother's hand. It was 8 o'clock when Marianne descended the stairs. Mrs. Peterson, Patricia, and Joshua were already positioned in the living room, along with Isabel. Robert was sitting on the sofa, his head in his hands. When he heard the footsteps, he stood up quickly. What he saw made his face lose all color. "Marianne! Marianne!" He ran towards her but stopped halfway, as if he couldn't believe she was real. "Where have you been? What happened? Why did you disappear?" Before Marianne could answer, Julianne appeared at the top of the stairs. She wore an elegant dress, her hair perfectly styled, her makeup impeccable. But when her eyes met Marianne's, something broke in that mask of perfection. "Marianne, so glad you're well." Julianne descended the stairs slowly, each word calculated. Robert was desperate. We all were. Marianne looked at her, and for the first time she felt no fear. She felt only a cold, controlled fury. "I'm sure you were. Especially you, Julianne. It must have been a shock to discover I survived." Robert looked from one to the other, confused. "What are you talking about?" "I'm talking about what really happened, Robert. About why I disappeared, about who tried to kill me." The word hung in the air like a bomb about to explode. Robert recoiled. "Kill? Marianne, you're not making sense." "She's confused, Robert," Julianne quickly intervened. "The pregnancy, the stress, clearly she's not well. We need to call a doctor." Marianne took a step forward. "I'm not confused, and I'm not crazy. I'm more lucid than I've been in years, and I have proof of everything." She nodded to Patricia, who approached with a folder full of documents. Robert, do you know Patricia? She worked at your company until 3 months ago. She was fired without explanation shortly after discovering something interesting. Robert looked at the woman, trying to remember. Patricia began to speak. I discovered that Julianne and you had a relationship for years, but that wasn't all. I discovered that she was embezzling funds, forging documents, and planning something against your wife. This is absurd, Julianne said, but her voice was tense. This woman was fired for incompetence and is now making up stories. Marianne opened the folder and began to spread documents on the coffee table. Then explain this. Emails between the two of you talking about me as if I were an obstacle. Financial documents showing that you have unauthorized access to Robert's personal accounts. And this, she pointed to a specific paper, Project M, your detailed plan of how to get rid of me. Robert picked up the papers, reading quickly. His face grew paler and paler. Julianne, what is this? Julianne shrugged, but her nervousness was starting to show. They are forged documents, Robert. Don't believe it. Marianne turned to Joshua. This is Joshua Miller. He was sent to inspect the farm in the Cotswolds last Sunday. Tell them what you found, Mr. Miller. The old farmer stepped forward, looking directly at Julianne. I found this lady here, he pointed to Marianne. Buried, alive next to the old silo. The earth was soft, freshly dug. She was barely breathing. A few more minutes and it would have been too late. Robert staggered, holding on to the sofa. Buried? Who would do such a thing? Marianne took a deep breath. It was her, Robert. Julianne. She sent me a fake message from your phone asking me to go to the farm. When I got there, she was waiting. She drugged me, buried me alive, and came back here as if nothing had happened. You're crazy, Julianne screamed, losing her composure for the first time. I was here in London all day. I was in virtual meetings, I have proof. Marianne smiled coldly. Yes, you do. Recorded meetings on your laptop, with the camera on, showing you in the office all day. Very clever. Except you recorded everything in the morning before you left. You put the video on a loop and let it play. When people thought they were talking to you in real time, they were actually watching a recording. How did you find that out? Julianne whispered. Because I still have friends at the company, Patricia replied. Friends who noticed you didn't blink. In the meetings. That your position never changed. That you looked like a frozen video. They thought it was strange but didn't say anything at the time. Until I asked. Robert looked at Julianne as if seeing a stranger. You did this. You really did this. Julianne took a step towards him, her hands outstretched. Robert, please, you don't understand. Everything I did was for us. She was in our way. She doesn't deserve you. She doesn't understand what you built, what you represent. I do. I've always been by your side. You tried to kill my wife, Robert said. His voice choked. And my child. You tried to kill my child. It was the first time he had acknowledged the baby as real, as important. Marianne felt something stir in her chest. Perhaps there was still hope. It was then that Isabel stepped forward. Her voice was small but firm. I saw. Everyone turned to the girl. Robert knelt in front of his daughter. What did you see, Princess? Isabel looked at Julianne. I saw her pushing Mommy. The silence was absolute. Marianne looked at her daughter, confused. She didn't remember Julianne pushing her, but then she understood. Isabel was speaking metaphorically, the way children do. She had seen Julianne pushing Marianne out of their lives, out of the family, but Robert interpreted it literally, and Julianne, seeing the accusation in everyone's eyes, panicked. She was in the way, Julianne screamed, her entire facade crumbling. Don't you understand? I worked for years, building this empire with Robert. I gave my all, and her? She just showed up, beautiful and young, and took everything. The position, the name, the life that should have been mine. Robert stood up slowly. Marianne never took anything from you, Julianne. You were never promised anything. You were my employee. I was more than that. Tears finally fell from Julianne's face, but they were tears of rage, not remorse. You told me you loved me, that one day we would be together, that she was just a mistake from the past. Marianne felt as if she had been punched. Robert averted his gaze, unable to deny it. "So it's true," Marianne whispered. "You said that to her." Robert ran his hands over his face. "Marie, It was a moment of weakness. I was frustrated, tired, I said things I shouldn't have, but I never wanted something like this to happen." Julianne laughed, a harsh, broken sound. "You didn't need to want it, Robert. You just needed to let it happen. And you did. You let me into your life, into your house, into your family. You let me get close to Isabel, know every detail of Marianne's routine. You made everything easy." The words were true, and everyone knew it. Robert had allowed, even if unconsciously, Julianne to completely infiltrate their lives. Mrs. Peterson, who had remained silent until then, finally spoke. "I also found this." She held up a small thermal bag. It was hidden in the guest bathroom where Miss Julianne is staying. Inside are syringes with unidentified substances. Julianne looked at the bag and something broke in her gaze. The game was over and she knew it. But instead of surrendering, she did something unexpected. She ran towards Isabel. Marianne reacted instinctively, placing herself between Julianne and her daughter. The two women collided, falling to the floor. Robert shouted, trying to separate them, but it was Joshua who acted first, grabbing Julianne by the arms and pulling her back. "Let me go," Julianne screamed, struggling. "You don't understand. I did everything right. I did everything right." Marianne got up, protecting Isabel behind her. "You tried to kill me, Julianne. You tried to kill my child. There's nothing right about that." It was at that moment that the police entered. Mrs. Peterson had called them as soon as the confrontation began, and they had waited outside, listening to everything through the security cameras that were transmitting live. "Julianne Meadows, you are under arrest for attempted murder," one of the officers announced, putting handcuffs on her. Julianne didn't cry, didn't scream, didn't beg. She just looked at Robert one last time and said, "You had everything, Robert, and you wasted it. I would have been perfect for you. We would have been perfect together." Robert didn't answer. He just watched as they led Julianne out of the mansion. When she disappeared through the door, he finally turned to Marianne. I'm so sorry for everything, for not seeing, for not protecting you, for allowing her to enter our lives." Marianne looked at the man she had married 10 years ago. She saw the lines of fatigue, the red eyes, the guilt etched on his face, and she felt something she hadn't expected to feel: compassion. "We both failed, Robert. I failed to fight for our family when I should have. You failed to value what you had. But almost losing everything made me understand something. Life is too precious to waste on pride and distance." Robert took a step towards her. "Can we start over? Can we try again?" Marianne touched her belly. "I don't know. But I know this baby deserves to have a present father. And Isabel deserves to have parents who fight for their family. So let's try, but it will be different this time, Robert. Very different." He nodded, tears finally falling. "I promise I will do things differently. I will be different." The following months were for healing. Robert temporarily stepped away from the company, leaving management in the hands of trusted individuals while he dedicated himself to his family. He went to therapy individually and with Marianne as a couple. He participated in every prenatal appointment, chose the baby's name with Marianne and Isabel, and prepared the baby's room with his own hands. Marianne also went to therapy. The trauma of being buried alive would not disappear quickly, but she worked on it every day. She had nightmares for weeks, waking in a panic, feeling the earth in her mouth. But Robert was always there, holding her hand, telling her she was safe. Julianne's trial was swift. The evidence was undeniable. Patricia testified about the defendant's dark past. Joshua described in detail how he found Marianne. The security camera recordings showed the full confession, and investigators discovered even more: forged documents, deleted emails that were recovered, cell phone location records showing she was near the farm on the day of the crime. Julianne was sentenced to 23 years in prison for attempted aggravated murder, kidnapping, and various other crimes. During the trial, she showed no remorse. She just looked at Robert one last time and said, "You know I truly loved you. That at least was real." Robert didn't answer. He just held Marianne's hand and left the courthouse. Isabel began to smile again. The girl had undergone child therapy, processing everything she had seen and lived through. Mrs. Peterson, who was promoted to house manager and received a substantial raise, pampered the girl whenever she could, and Isabel, in turn, was eagerly awaiting the arrival of her little brother. In her 7th month of pregnancy, Marianne and Robert made a decision. The old farm in the Cotswolds, where everything had happened, would be transformed. It would not be sold to real estate speculators, as originally planned. It would be transformed into an environmental recovery space, a sanctuary for women victims of violence who needed a safe place to rebuild their lives. Patricia was invited to manage the project. She accepted with tears in her eyes, finally finding a purpose after everything she had been through. Joshua was hired as the caretaker of the site, tending the fields and gardens that would be planted. In her 8th month of pregnancy, on a golden October afternoon, Marianne returned to the farm for the first time since she had been rescued. Robert was by her side, holding her hand. Isabel ran ahead, exploring the field that was now clean and prepared. Marianne walked slowly to the spot where she had been buried. There were no longer any signs of the hole. In its place, a tree had been planted, a yellow ivy tree, which in a few years would bloom beautifully, transforming that place of death into a symbol of life. Next to the tree, a simple plaque had been installed. Marianne knelt before it and read the words aloud, for the truths they tried to hide, and for those who had the courage to hear them. Robert knelt beside her. "This farm almost took you from me. Now it will save other people. It will give hope to those who have lost everything." Marianne touched the plaque, then her belly. The baby kicked strongly, as if responding. She smiled through her tears. "Thank you for not letting me die there," she whispered, not knowing if she was talking to God, to destiny, or simply to the life that stubbornly continued to beat in her heart, even when all seemed lost. 2 weeks later, on a quiet November morning, Marianne went into labor. Robert was by her side, holding her hand, counting each contraction, wiping her sweat, saying words of encouragement. Isabel waited anxiously in the waiting room with Mrs. Peterson. After 8 hours of labor at 3 in the afternoon, Peter came into the world. A healthy boy with wide-open eyes, who looked at his mother as if he recognized her, as if he knew everything she had faced to bring him to life. Marianne held him in her arms, tears streaming freely. Robert was beside her, one hand on his wife's shoulder, the other gently touching his son's head. At that moment, there was no company, no empire. There was nothing but that hospital room and the family he had almost lost. "Thank you for fighting," he whispered to Marianne. "Thank you for not giving up. Thank you for giving us a second chance." When Isabel was finally able to come in to meet her brother, she climbed onto the bed carefully and looked at the baby with admiration. "He's so tiny," she whispered. "I'll take care of him forever, Mummy. I'll protect him." Marianne kissed her daughter's forehead. "I know you will, my love. You're the bravest sister he could have." The following months were for adaptation, for sleepless nights, for diapers and feedings, for first laughs and first scares. But they were also months of healing. The family that had been almost destroyed was rebuilding itself, not as it was before, but in a new, stronger, more conscious way. Robert drastically reduced his workload. He hired a reliable management team and established clear boundaries between work and family. He had dinner at home every night. He played with Isabel before bed. He woke up in the middle of the night to help with Peter. And he talked with Marianne, really talked, about his fears, dreams, hopes. Marianne found her own voice. She began to get involved with the farm project, visiting regularly, meeting the women who were being helped there. Their stories echoed her own. Women who had been silenced, manipulated, who had almost lost everything, and now they were finding the strength to start over. 1 year after the rescue, the family returned to the farm for the official inauguration of the Recovery Center. There was a small event with local authorities, the press, and most importantly, the first residents of the center, women of all ages from different places, all carrying stories of survival. Marianne spoke briefly, holding Peter in her lap while Robert and Isabel stood by her side. "A year ago, this place almost took my life. almost took my child, but I learned something in that damp earth, in that suffocating darkness. I learned that we are stronger than we imagine, that life insists on continuing, even when all seems lost, and that always, there is someone willing to dig through the earth to find us. The audience applauded. Joshua, sitting in the front row, discreetly wiped away tears. Patricia, beside him, smiled proudly. Mrs. Peterson held Isabel, who waved to everyone with enthusiasm. After the ceremony, Marianne walked alone to the IP tree. The tree had grown significantly in a year, its branches reaching for the sky, promising golden flowers next spring. She placed her hand on the trunk and closed her eyes. "You survived," a voice said behind her. Marianne turned and saw one of the center's residents, a woman of about 40, with visible scars on her arms and a story in her eyes that Marianne recognized. "I survived," she confirmed. The woman approached and stood beside her, looking at the tree. "I survived too. And now I'm trying to figure out what to do with this life that insisted on continuing." Marianne smiled. "We live. We love. We help other people survive too. I think that's it." The woman nodded. "It's a good plan." They stood there for a few minutes, in companionable silence, two survivors honoring the miracle of still breathing. Then Marianne heard Peter cry. Robert was coming. Towards her, the baby in his arms, Isabel running alongside. Marianne looked at her family. Imperfect, wounded, but real, true, and finally, entirely hers. The sun was setting, painting the sky orange and pink. The fields around the farm undulated with the wind. And at that moment, standing beside the tree that grew where she had almost died, surrounded by people who loved her, and by women she would help to save, Marianne Miller felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. Marianne's story didn't end that day in the damp earth, it just began again. And this time she was writing her own script. Dear listeners, we hope Marianne and Robert's story has touched your heart. If you were moved, leave your like, subscribe to the channel, and tell us in the comments what stood out most to you. Every day, we bring intense stories like this, which reveal the deepest side of the human soul. We look forward to seeing you in the next episode.